Hello guys, and welcome to my series of tutorials developed especially for you to ensure your understanding in programs such as 3ds Max, Adobe Photoshop and Unity. And I aim at making you at least familiar and comfortable with using those three programs to potentially develop a computer game, pretty attractive one which will be interesting to play and not so hard to make. So I will start by going to 3ds Max and show you around there, guys. And it's gonna have everything, about 1,000 commands, each of which will have an option for you to tweak, and you can change everything by going to those options and plugging in your combinations. Make sure you don't plug in some combination that is taken. If you do so, it will say on the message right here that this combination is taken, so please take another one. Alright, done with that, keeping the polygon count as low as possible. So mesh first, then texturing, which is going to be done in Photoshop, then exporting your models into the game and compiling them, writing the scripts for each model, or at least part of models. That is going to determine later how your game is run and how it's going to be developed later. What am I saying? How it's going to be played. Basically, your gameplay. You're shaping your gameplay at the very end in the game engine. But for now, we're developing meshes. So let's see what we're going to make next. Okay, for example, for this rug right here, you can see that it's just a basic plane. It's one polygon. It's very efficient in terms of polygons. And it's very nice when we put textures on it. Right now it doesn't look like a rug, but believe me, if we put texture on it from the Photoshop, if we assign a texture to it, it's going to be looking like a real rug, especially if it has got a proper shader, which is going to be assigned in the game engine later to it as an object. But right now, without texture, it just looks like a basic square, and it is actually. So it's a plane, if we put it down, that we can draw by going to create panel, then going down to geometry and then plane, just dragging, and you can see that we created it right there under the scene. But because my scene is above the grid, we're gonna have to move it up. So press W is a shortcut for moving it up, and bring it up like that, and that's your rug. Okay, make sure if you go from create to modify panel, you look, which we're not gonna be using right now. So make sure this is 1, 1. The shortcut for bringing it up is W. The shortcut for rotating is E, and you can rotate using those axes, or rotate it freely, which I don't really like to use. Okay, you can scale it by pressing R, and scale it either this way or in all 3 dimensions, which for playing isn't going to really work because it's just 2-dimensional thing. So if you scale it from center, usually the object would grow in all 3 directions equally. Whereas if you scale it, for instance, in the XY plane, it's only going to be expanded in the horizontal plane. And same for this part, for ZY plane as well. And pressing and dragging on the axes is gonna, you can see that it's gonna scale it in the only single direction. Okay, so just draw a plane. This is gonna be your rug. Very nice. So we got that. Let's see what else we can make. To make a painting on the wall, and I just centered on it by pressing Z on the keyboard, which just centered it, and I can rotate around my selected center, which is right now the painting, obviously, because I centered on it. You can rotate around the center by pressing simultaneously the Alt and middle mouse button, and just rotating around the object you selected and centered. To zoom out, you can scroll the middle mouse button, go into create, box, and just drag, release, move up and click. You got your box. scale it down slightly, like that, and we're gonna have a borders. We're gonna have borders here, which are gonna be like the borders for our painting, and in the center we're gonna have a picture later. And the picture is gonna be assigned using the texture, so don't worry right now for a moment. So don't worry about texturing or anything. We got a basic box right now. If you go to modify, you can check that it has length segments 1, not 2, not 3, 1. Same with width, same with height, and we don't need that. So how do we make it look like a how do we make it look like a frame? Basically, you have to, this is like a raw object right now. You have to right click on it, go to convert to, and convert it to editable poly. This will make the object editable in terms of polygons, so you can select polygons and later modify them. You can select borders, which I'll talk about later. You can select edges, and you can select vertices. Is 1 for vertex, 2 for edge, and so on till 5. 5 is the element, which I'll talk about later again, so just don't worry about that for now. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are the shortcuts for changing your mode. Press 4, go into polygon mode, left click on the top polygon, and scroll down. You can click and drag down, scroll down into inset, and inset your polygon, basically create another one. So right now we have 5 polygons instead of 1 already, because we've inserted it. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 there. So still 1 there. So select this one and go into extrude. And you can extrude it either upwards or down. And down is what we need. Be careful though, if you go down too much, this is what's gonna happen. You're gonna have your bottom polygon, which is this one, which is a single which is which is this one. God damn it, what's happening? Which is this one, and this polygon top one, when you extrude it, is gonna go through the bottom one. So make sure you don't overdo it. But that looks about right. So that's gonna be our frame for our painting, and we call it done here. So we basically have a square painting. I'm saying basically too much, so I should quit this word. It's a parasite word. We have a painting, and I'm gonna delete it for now because we don't need it. And make sure you've quit any regime of editing before you delete anything, because otherwise you're gonna just delete a polygon or whatever, or an edge, whatever you have selected on this object. Unless you quit the editing mode, you're not going to be able to switch to another object, whatever. You're just focusing on this object. So remember this. Switch off, and then you can move around, change, select another objects. And so I'm going to delete this one for now. Press delete. You can drag around the scene by just holding middle mouse button and moving your mouse. That's going to move you from left to right, up and down, just in one plane that you're facing, and obviously not many of the planes that you can move in. So just left to right, up and down. Let's see what else I have here. Okay, we got a bucket here, which is which looks like this. If I center on it, which looks like normal bucket, which is going to be wooden later with a texture. How we make it is go to create, cylinder, make a cylinder. That's a bit too high. You can either scale it, or you can go to modify panel here for this object selected, and first of all let's change the number of sides so it looks smoother, and make sure you don't have any of the height segments, because for now we don't need them. We are done with this part. Let's go convert to editable poly, and let's make it be able to hold something inside of it, visually at least. So select the top polygon, go into inset, and inset it about by that much. Depends how big your object is, but mine is about 2. So do exactly the same thing as you did for the box before to make it a painting. So inset, then extrude down, down, down until you meet the bottom, and then up. So that's our bucket. Select with this one selected, so press Control when you select another one, select this one as well, and scale them outwards, because my bucket doesn't go inwards, it just goes outwards. Okay, we got that. Maybe the inner one, so just so without holding the Control, select the inner one and just bring it down so that it looks more thick on the walls. Then you noticed how mine has some kind of ring around it. So have a look what happens. We have two selection modes, which is this is a box. When you draw it, you select an object, obviously, or anything that you are working on within the object. So for instance, if we're working with edges, if I drag and release the which has a box that crosses the dotted line, meaning that whatever you select, it's gonna select everything that your line has inside, that your square has inside, or has crossed, or having something that line has crossed. It's gonna select everything. So you can notice how I select, how I draw my box here, and this edge, for instance, although it's not fully selected, it's gonna be selected as well because the line has crossed it. So that means it's very useful, because if we are working in narrow space and we need to select some kind of ring, we can just go into this mode, drag with the selection box and select the edges, and then scale them in the way that we need. Be careful though, because right now we have two rings, outer one and inner one. That means that we're not going to be able to just work on the outer ones. We have to somehow deselect the inner ones. But there is a smart way of selecting the outer edges. Just click on one, and if you're working on 3ds Max 2010 and later, I'm working on 3ds Max 2011 right now, you're gonna have this panel right here, and you can open it by just clicking on this little button here, or you can use the options, the basic standard options allowed for your usage here, and which is shrink, grow, ring, and loop. Different modes of selection for you. So select the edge and go into, just press this button, which is called ring, and it's going to be smart for you and select everything around your cylinder like that. And notice how it's different from just dragging across. It doesn't select everything. It goes around, round, round, round until it meets this edge that you had before. So ring is going to just loop around. And now if we go to, there's a button here in Edit and Edges section called Connect. If you press on it, you're gonna connect it once with one loop, with one loop, with one ring. If we need more, you have to click not on Connect but on the little box next to it on the right, and then you're gonna have this little window pop up, and you can select the amount of rings you want to connect your selected edges with. So right now let's go for 3, I'll say. How much we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 4 edges. Okay. And so notice how those ones, vertical ones, excuse me, got deselected, and the new rings are selected for us. But we don't need them right now. Select those two and press loop, and you can scale them upwards. You can't right now because obviously we are working on the mode of scaling for each edge individually, and we can scale them outwards, obviously, but we can't do anything above because all of the edges are positioned horizontally. This might sound a bit confusing, but what I really mean is that whenever we're trying to scale something, we're just working on one edge. But since we're working on many edges together, each one is going to be tweaked in its own unique way, not all together. So you can see that this one cannot be scaled upwards because it's horizontally totally. So if we want to, for instance, work on all the edges together, let's do a loop again. We are going to have to select a different mode of scaling from. So right now you can click and hold to have the 3 options available for you to choose from. So right now we're working on individual mode for each object that we're working on. If we're scaling a group, the relative position of each other is gonna be changed, I guess. Maybe not, but they're not gonna move outwards from each other, unless they're linked to each other somehow, like edges are. But if they're not, that means that they're gonna stay in their position, just grow in size, each one individually. So if we want to make them grow and fly away from each other like stars and galaxies do in the universe when we're scaling them, a crazy idea, I know. Just select the second mode here. So right now, if we're gonna be scaling upwards, everything is gonna grow up like that. But we want to have something similar to this kind of ring. So I would say press W, move those 2 up until you have something that is horizontal like that, and select a loop of polygons. For that, you'll have to go to this option here if you have 3ds Max 2010 and later, and then oops, yep, and then select loop. Right there. Sorry. And make sure you have second options selected for scaling, and scale them outwards like that. You can see that this ring is slightly bigger in radius and diameter than the top one, so perhaps let's select this edge, go into loop, make sure it's on second mode, and scale it down slightly. Not sure if it's better. Let's zoom in slightly more, and well, it's fine like that, I guess. So go into this edge, press loop, move it up like this, and scale it down like that. And this ring has to go up like so. It really bothers me how big it is. So you just saw what I did. I pressed on this cube and went to top mode, to top look, and right now I'm above the object, strictly above the object. But because I'm in perspective, if I move left to right, you can see how the object changes. To go into orthographic mode, which is going to remove any perspective and make everything you draw perfectly precise, just press U, and this is going to bring you to orthographic mode. Press Z to center on the object so you don't lose it out of your sight if you had it selected. For instance, if you're working on polygon on an editable poly of this object, it's already going to be selected for you, so just press Z and go and focus on it. So we have this outer ring that bothers me because it's so big. We're going to scale it down like that, and go out of the polygon of the editor mode from any of the options. Press P to go into perspective, zoom out, and press Z to center on your object. Am I in perspective mode? Yes, I am. But this looks horrible. Why it's so? Yes. Of course I know why it's so. Basically, your field of view right now is so short that you can see everything in perfect detail, but you can't see much around you. You have to rotate a lot to see what's happening around you. It's similar to some kind of zoom, big zoom in cameras. More pleasing to look. I'm gonna go for more. And obviously, if you go too much, you're gonna have huge field of view. You're gonna be able to literally see what's happening next to your ear, which is crazy, I'd say, but could be a nice effect, or could be really handy when working inside enclosed buildings. So that's too much. That's about right. Okay, so we have a bucket here already built for us by us. Polygon. So obviously it's so big, it's as big as our window. Let's scale it down. Press R and go into the center of our scaling. Scale it down and bring it magically through the wall inside of our house. There. Hi man, I'm your brother. Okay, we're not gonna need anything that I draw, just to show you guys. So I'm gonna delete that because I already have a bucket. Very nice thing is that you can copy inside 3ds Max, clone objects very easily. Just select your object, press W, excuse me, and just press Shift and move it away. You're gonna have a little brother next to it. So that's with moving. You can also clone in the exact same way as moving. Clone it with scaling. Just press Shift and go down or up, whatever you want. So you're gonna have either big brother or small brother clone. Just press Shift and drag out. And you can do the same with rotation. Press Shift again and rotate. But I usually clone it with Move tool because it's easier for me. Well, actually depends what I want, but mostly moving. Okay. Let's see the bench, how the bench is done. It consists of a box, which I tweaked around, and it has some kind of changed cylinders, 4 of them. So you can obviously figure out that we have only 1 cylinder here changed, and then cloned to make it 4, and then everything, all 5 objects are combined together to make 1 bench as a whole. So how we do it? We want to keep the polygon count as low as possible because we're making a game. So I'm gonna show you, it's gonna be a part where I'm gonna show you how to optimize your model as well. Our basic optimization stage right now. So if we go to create a box, make a box, it's gonna be top of our bench. Convert to, make sure it has 1 segment in length, 1 segment in width, and 1 in height. So we're just working with plain box. Convert to, right click, convert to editable poly, press to make sure you are in this option and just go and drag across the box. Go into connect, but don't press on connect, press on little window next to it and connect with let's say 3 edges. And also I want to tell you, if you connect, you probably know this, but okay, if you go into connect, you can not only change the amount of segments you connect your edges with, but you can change their position, so you can pinch them away from each other or towards each other. Control Z to cancel that. You can also slide them from left to right, so that's pretty handy as well. But for now we just need 3 segments, that's it. Press 2, we are already on 2, so that's fine. Go and click on those 3 segments individually. Drag them out, because we're making a round top for our bench. Drag them out and do exactly the same thing for those 3. Select them individually, drag out, then select the middle one just by itself and drag out slightly so it looks round. Then, because we're right now in this mode, if we select like that, we're gonna select every edge that we have. So I want to shrink it. I want to shrink the bench, but if I shrink it, you'll see that we're losing the roundness of our round corners here. So we don't want to scale it in the Y direction. What we want to do is, god damn it, is bring those edges to the left without changing the round shape that we have. So click on here and just drag and drag like that. Position your camera so you can see everything. Go press W and bring your edges closer to the other side. Deselect anything, press Z to center, check that everything looks nice. Perhaps press 4 on this side, Control on this one as well to select 2 of them, scale them, and maybe make it like that. Notice again, once again, you can scale it towards each other because you are in this mode, in the second mode of scaling. If you are in the first one, because each edge doesn't have any direction towards axis, you're not going to be able to move them towards each other with scaling. You can see how I'm struggling and can't do anything. So make sure you're in the second mode before scaling them towards each other. Let me tweak this a little bit more. Okay, so we have the top part of our bench, which is going to look like this. 1, 2, 3, 4 segments here, 4 segments there. Alright, now let's make legs for it. Going to create geometry and cylinder. Drastically increase the amount of vertices and polygons that you have, which is going to have an impact later on your game and how you play it, how tough it's going to be to run. So you always aim to make your game look beautiful, but have as less geometry as possible. So let's make it 12. Right click, convert to Editable Poly, and connect. Press 2, select those edges. Press connect. Connect with 2 or 3 segments. Yep. And right now you can see if I want to make it like a cone, so cone-like, I guess, I could struggle slightly and just do it polygon by polygon by ring, which isn't going to be really efficient, but it's probably, yeah, it's what we're gonna do right now. Sorry for that, but we're gonna scale each ring individually. So loop, scale it, loop, scale it, and of course the best game developer and game maker, the best one, is gonna make his models quickly and efficiently. He's gonna think through of his design while he's making the model, so that he goes around any problems that might emerge later had he developed it in the wrong way from the beginning. So what we could do actually is not to create a cylinder, but to go create a cone, of course. Create a cone and make our life easier by creating a cylinder which has a tapper on its top. And you can change the radius of the bottom and radius of the top. Press Z to center, and we now have a cylinder with 24 sides. We need to make it 13, and we need to have height segments of about 3, I guess, because each segment that's going on top of our vertical ones, it's going to increase our vertices count not by 1, but not our polys count not by 1, by 12. So we made a cone, and we want to have the legs that are vertical here, but shaped to be at an angle on the side. So we're gonna convert this cone into poly, and perhaps go into the right mode on the cube, and press U to go into orthographic mode. Whoa, we are right now in the outer space. No, we're not. But what we're gonna do is we have already a selected polygon on top. We're gonna drag it out to the side. We're gonna go into this option, which I explained earlier. Go into the edge mode by pressing 2, as I said before, and dragging everything to the side. Okay. Of course, as you progress further, later I will explain to you that you have so many modifiers that you can use on the objects, and basically make your life easier and make your projects better to work with. But for now, forget about those. We're going to be working strictly with edges and vertices and polygons. We have the leg ready to attach to our bench. Perhaps it's too big. Press P to go into perspective, back into perspective. Position it down below your bench. It's too big for our bench, so let's scale it down. Notice how it's straight here, bend outwards there, but unchanged on if you look from the other side, 90 degrees to the right, how it goes completely equally to the sides. That's why we're gonna click Control, select everything, move it outwards, and position the cylinder there. Press E, rotate around, so that the leg looks towards this direction. Position it below the table or the bench. Now we could, as I said before, we could press Shift and drag it, but because we're clever, we are not going to do that. We're going to lose time if we do this. So what we're going to do instead is not drag it and then rotate everything to make it look good. We're going to select the leg, go into this option, which is mirror, press copy, and select the axis we want to mirror the object at, and offset it by about this much. And notice how it has its direction preserved. the one that we curved out earlier. It curves out here towards here, and it curves out towards there, and curves out towards here, curves out towards here as well on the other leg, and stays straight here. So we've done that with mirroring. The only thing that's left for you to do is click Control, select the previous leg, and mirror it once again with copy, not by no clone, but with copy, no instance, no reference, nothing. Copy, and then select the axis you want to copy. Obviously it's Y, and offset it by this much. Press OK, and now you have the bench. But when we try to move it, what happens is it detaches from each other, so brutalized. We have to connect it somehow. To do that, you already have those cones converted into editable polys, so you can either attach your top part to one of the cones and everything to this cone, or you can attach everything to the top part, which isn't really going to make a difference unless you have this part called something different, not a box for instance, but a top part. And then this is a cone 1, cone 2, cone 3, cone 4. If we call this one a bench, so if we call the closest right cone a bench, and press enter to enter your name. If we call this one a bench, what happens if we select the top part and then try to attach everything towards it? It's gonna make everything that had a name before, like cone or a leg. It's gonna name it. Top part. Have a look. If we press attach, and then we can select this object, this object, this object, this object, anything in our scene that's not attached already to the box. So if we click on the bench, on our cone here, it's gonna become purple, and it's gonna be a part of top part. So you can connect everything, and this cone is no longer bench, but a top part, everything is top part. And we now have the bench, which kind of look ridiculous. We're gonna tweak it slightly a bit later, but we have a bench, and it's called top part, so we can rename it into bench. Voila, like that. You notice how our legs right now are slightly to the side. If somebody sat on this bench, they would probably collapse down and fall and break the bench into pieces. So let's move those legs towards each other. But how can we do this? If we select the polygons, we're going to be moving them and deforming the object itself. We want to select our legs, and even though we attach them to our top part, even though we did this, we can select them because they're stored in history. Just press 5 with the bench selected. Press 5, go into the element section and select your legs, because those are elements, separate elements that you've attached to the box, and bring them to the side, towards inside. Select other two, bring them in, and if you think that the bench is way too long, you can select those two edges and bring them in, and be smart, because with those two rings selected you're gonna move the whole polygon count right there. So that's pretty neat and pretty interesting as well. So we move them towards the center, and with this ring selected we can move it out, keep it there, and bring them in and keep the segments there, and select those two elements, bring them in, select those two elements, bring them in. Done. So that's our bench. If we bring it into the house, that's what's gonna look like. Kind of big. So press R, and if you press R too many times, you can have some slight problems. For instance, ununiform deformation. And pressing R means that you are changing, where is it? You're selecting the scale tool on top of this panel right there, and you have three methods of scaling. Let's say if we want to scale this bench in the Z and X direction, if we scale it that way, nothing's gonna happen to Y axis, believe me. Oops, sorry, that's my cat. Let's continue. So where was I? Yes, if you want to scale this bench in the X and Z direction, what's gonna happen when you scale it with this mode selected, the first one? It's gonna scale it only in this plane. Nothing's gonna happen to Y, believe me. If you want to scale it in Z and Y direction, it's gonna be scaled in Z and Y. Nothing's gonna happen to X direction. So that's called uniform, I believe, uniform scaling. And we want to scale it uniformly, so we can press on center and scale it down. What happens if you are in another mode, which is ununiform scaling? What happens when you press R too many times? You go through those modes rapidly. Depends how fast you're pressing. So if you suddenly select the ununiform mode, that's what's going to happen. The sign of scaling is going to change to the triangle with the down arrow, and this means if you scale it, for instance, in the X and Z direction, for instance, you want to scale it down, what's going to happen is the object's volume is going to be preserved and it's going to be pushed out through the Y direction, so perpendicular axis to the Z and X. So it's a cross product vector, I believe, in high-level maths in IB. It's called cross product vector. So look what happens if I scale it down on this plane. It's gonna get pushed out towards Y just by scaling in this plane. So that's I hate this mode. But we have the bench there, and if we are really neat, we want to make it as long polygon count as possible. So let's see, this bench in itself is about 300 polygons in total. So if you have, let's say, if you clone them and you have suddenly 1,000 of those, it's gonna mean that you have 300,000 of polygons working all together, and this is gonna be horrible for your game. So by all means, we're gonna try to reduce the polygon count, do anything we can. So let's see, we have this top part, which is actually flat. If we want to make it round, so for instance, if somebody really fat sat on it, we can have it bent down like this, which would make it look slightly more natural, I believe. Maybe not, but if we want, we can make it look this way, so it's slightly bent. However, if we are not really caring about anything like that, we are gonna use those segments to remove those segments. We're gonna remove those segments in the good of our game productivity. So we have 4 polygons here instead of 1 potentially. So we would want to make this 1 polygon to reduce the polygon count. So let's go to the edge mode, select those 3 edges, and then if we delete them, we cannot delete them because we're going to delete the whole segment physically. Look what happens if I select those 3 and press delete. Bam! You're going to have the top polygon cut off, sliced off. And this is not what we want. We can actually make it as a 1 polygon in no time, but it still takes our time, and that's not what we're going to do. We want to select those three edges, and right click and select, oh, you can't do it here, oops, my cat. Okay, it took me about 30 seconds to realize that I was in the border mode, not in the edge mode. So select the edge, press 2 to select the edge, just click on it, and then right click, remove, or go into the panel called Edit Edges and click remove, and do the same thing for the bottom ones. Remove. Now we have one polygon, or actually two effectively, instead of 8. So we've reduced our polygon count on the top part by, I guess, 10% for the top part. Still not much for the whole bench, but quite enough. And notice here I have 3 rings of edges on my old bench. Here I have 5. So we're gonna remove 2 of them. Make sure that your selection is on enclosed, and select your rings in this way. And the thing is, if you remove your edges by just right clicking and selecting remove, if you go into the vertex mode, you will see that your old vertices are still there hiding in place and you haven't removed them. So you have to remove your edges and then go to the vertex mode and remove the vertices as well to make those edges from 2 to 1, because effectively you're having 2 edges right now, one here and one there, until you remove those vertices. So to avoid this, be a pro. Don't use the right clicking stuff. So instead of doing this, select your edges and click Control backspace. This will remove both of the edges and the vertices together. If you of course click backspace, that's just going to remove the whatever you selected, leaving behind the vertices. So Control backspace to remove those edges. And let's clean up this one, this ring, and this ring. Control backspace, remove. And let's see. Okay, this ring is way too high, but if I select it and try to move it down, it's gonna deform our leg, and if you're gonna be trying to be sneaky and figure out something, it's gonna be tough for you, but it's gonna be not really beautiful, not really, how it's said as a Russian, not really efficient. So go into the edge mode on the edit geometry, and this means that anything you do, any transformation that you do to your edge or loop, anything you do to it, it's gonna be kept on top of those edges surrounding it. So have a look. If I move it, it's gonna stay along those edges, like sliding on the rails. It's not gonna deform our object or anything. You're not gonna be able to move it too much to the left or to the right like you would had it been set to none. So like this, you can move it around in the XY panel, but on the edge selected, you're not going to be able to do anything, because everything is going to be done in relation to the neighbor edge. So Control Z to cancel this. Select edge, bring it down. Actually, don't be silly and select all the rings together you want to move, all the rings you want to move together. Bring them down. Select another set of rings, like this one. Bring those down as well. And we now have a pretty nice looking bench. Okay. And in case you're wondering, why am I having this kind of frame around my objects? God knows if you're wondering or not. But if you're thinking, what the hell is this? Why does he have the squares seen and not in this way? All you have to do is either go into the into this option, click Edged Faces, or be a pro, once again press F4 on your keyboard. So little things make you faster and efficient. So press F4 to click Edged Faces, and in case you want to see through the objects, you might want to use the wireframe mode. Again, you can click here inside the wireframe, and suddenly you can see everything within the lines. You can see what's going on inside the objects and stuff, which you couldn't have seen using the smooth plus edged faces mode. But if you go to the wireframe, you can now see that those four legs have polygons on top of them, like this one, that one, this one. Well, basically this one and this one on top of the legs. You can see that when I'm trying to click it and reach the polygon, because it's inside the box, you're not going to be able to select it because there is a polygon here on top which doesn't let you. So it's effectively this polygon, and you can't click through it unless you remove it and then click on that one. So that's the thing I haven't found the solution to. But what you can do is just zoom into the object and select your polygons, and everything's going to be fine that way. Then you can move them around, and once again make sure that you are in the proper mode, because if you are not in none but in edge, what's going to happen when you're going to try to move it left to right, it's just going to rotate the polygon like that. You can see. So none. We're not going to do anything because it's going to make it look worse. Okay. And one more thing. Yes, when you're working on the polygons, if you're trying to select a polygon and suddenly you don't see a red selection like this when you click on polygon, but some kind of red square, that means that you have pressed a F2 key, which makes it easier to perceive when you have too much red, but makes it harder to see what have you selected. Make it look back to have a red color that fills the polygon. And when you're removing your segments, when you are simplifying your model in terms of segments, look what happens when you try to control backspace those. So remove those edges. Bam. You've just lost part of your geometry. So make sure that you are optimizing properly, that you're not going to lose anything by deleting that segment, for instance. If you're not cautious, you're going to have a problem, because you're going to suddenly kill parts of your object very fast, and it's going to look terrible. We're going to delete it because we don't need it anymore. We've optimized it. We've attached the legs to the bench before I showed it to you, and I've shown you how to mirror the legs, how to rotate them, how to scale them properly, and how to make a final product which looks like a wooden bench later. Now it looks just like a mesh. So let's see what else we can do. Well, bed is very basic. I guess you'll be able to make it yourself very easily and very fast. Just go into box, create a box with a height of about that much, center it by pressing Z, convert to editable poly, go into the unenclosed selection mode, select those vertices, connect them with 2, and without doing anything, just without even pressing control, just go around, select those 2, connect with 2 edges, press 4 to go into the polygon mode, and then click inset it by about, say, that much, select two of your polygons, select those two as well, move them out. Now different pair, and this one as well. Control, click to select more, extrude by that much. Really simple. Very quickly we've got something that reminds us of a table. Not a bad, but if we make it longer and if we go to selection mode, enclosed, I explained what it means earlier, and drag the bed out, what happens is, because we haven't selected those edges, make sure that you select all the edges, drag it out, so we're not losing any of the geometry. We have something that looks like a maybe like 1.5 people bed. The bed that can hold up to 2 people, I guess, if they squeeze too much. So press 4, not F4, but just 4. Select those edges, press R, scale them. Make sure you're in the uniform scaling tool, as I explained earlier. So scale it uniformly. Press W, bring it down to make it more comfy to lie at. And it's unnecessary, but I'm gonna explain to you one more thing about editable poly mode. Yes, first of all, keep in mind my words that you are working on this object only if you are in the editable poly mode. That means that you have something selected in from those 5 options. So either you're working on edges of the object, vertex, or anything, and you're not going to be able to click on anything within the scene because you're just focusing on this object. So right now on vertices, right now on edges, if I press 3 on the borders around the holes, so for instance if I kill this polygon, we're gonna have a hole in there, and this square is gonna become a border. So if we press 3, we can easily enclose it with a segment, with a polygon, by pressing right click and then cap. So, and if we return back, if we press 4, we're focusing on editing the polygons. If we press 5, we are working on individual elements that the object is combined of, like we did before with the bench, where you had 4 different legs, and the 5th element would be at top of the bench. Okay. Now, right now, because we've quitted those options, we are now just within the object. We can click on anything and switch to it and work on something else. But if we return back to bed, what I wanted to show you is that when you deform an object, so for instance press 2 and select some kind of edge, if you bring it up, you see instantly a change in shadows, which means that something has been done to our geometry, which the computer doesn't like. It sees that this polygon consists of 4 vertices, but it's bent in a way really that the computer doesn't like. It says that it basically means that you have a polygon which shouldn't be bent. None of the polygons should be bent this way unless it's a live mesh, I believe. So if it's a character, organics, probably it would. But right now it's bad. And for objects, you would want to go to the, in this situation, you would want to go to the vertex, select those 2 vertices, and then right click, or just scroll down and find connect somewhere. Yeah, here, and press connect. So right now you'll have this poor little polygon subdivided into 2 polygons, and if we do the same thing for this polygon, we can either connect those 2, so it's going to make it look better. We can either connect those 2, right click, connect, and have some kind of, I don't know, pillow-like or whatever people had before that when they didn't have pillows. So you have this kind of thing, or you could remove those you could remove those edges, and make sure you don't press Control backspace, because that's gonna remove the edge, including the vertices on its ends. So we're automatically gonna lose the vertex here and here, and basically make our model very, very incorrect. Right click or simply press backspace, and you will have an object just like before we connected it with the vertices. So we did it this way and that way. What we can do now is connect the opposite ones, and it's gonna make it look more capacious, I believe, and more different from what we had before. So if we connect it that way, you see how it's different from what we had before. What we had before was this. We had it this way. See? As opposed to this way. There. But our goal, the moral of the story is, don't let your polygons to get bent unless you want it to be so, and make sure that you are not tweaking or twisting your model too much and have a lack of segments, because otherwise you're going to end up in the situation that you had before in the bench, where you will be killing parts of your geometry and make it look weird. So also you can have different types of surface presentation. You can have a look, for instance, if I have this object selected, you can go into the Graphite Modeling tools, which are present, I believe, from 3ds Max 2010, as I said earlier, or 9, somewhere around there. If you click on hard, that's going to make your model bulgy, very sharp. If you make it smooth, it's going to try to, at least, although you're going to have the geometry staying sharp, it's going to make your bed look like it's smooth. And then smooth 30 takes different parts of the bed and smooths them out in a slightly, I'd say, easier way than the just smooth does. So smooth takes the whole bed and makes something that looks like a biological mesh. So very round, very smooth. Smooth 30 has a look and sees whatever is, I believe, exceeding the angle of 45 is going to be regarded as a mesh, as a different segment with another set of polygons. So for instance, it sees that those polygons are at an angle greater than the set one. I believe it's 45, but it's different from those ones. Those three, 1, 2, 3. So those guys different from those ones, and you're gonna have different shadowing on them, which is smoother than the smooth option, and hard is the hardest one. So if you're in Editable Poly, if you selected the box, our bed at the moment, if you're lost in the menu and you don't want to scroll up and then select whatever you want, you can just press 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it's going to bring you immediately to the top of the menu, which is really handy if you have lots of options that you are using here. For instance, connect, you would be using many times, extrude, chamfer, bridge, weld. Weld you usually use on the vertices, but still. And you would want to put everything that you don't use to the bottom of your menu. So let's say you obviously can collapse each menu, each envelope, or each section, and you can expand each section like a folder, and you can drag everything to the needed position. So if we want edit geometry to be above edit edges, we can drag it above, and suddenly edit geometry is there, and now we have those options closer to the top and more handy if you need them. But I like it this way, so edit edges and then edit geometry there. That's it, I guess, for now. But we are continuing with our tutorial because we still have lots of stuff to go through. Let's see, if, for instance, Let's go into the vertex mode and select this one, this guy on edge, the very corner. It's a single vertex which controls 3 of our polygons, this one, and this one, those 3 polygons. Suddenly we can separate into 3 vertices by right-clicking and saying break. Now, because we have 3 edges going to this single point, because we've broken it, it means that each edge will have a vertex. And although they're all at the same place, by clicking on this spot there, we will only select one of those 3 vertices. We can drag it out, and we will have something similar to that. Okay? Now, let's do the same thing for the bottom one. Break. We now have 4 vertices here, and I should have shown it to you in more detail. Notice there are only 3 vertices because 1, 2, 3, like axes. 3 edges were going into this single point that were broken into 3. Here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes, 5 now. 5 edges. Hadn't we broken this one, it would be 4 edges, but now it's 5 edges going into the single point. And if we break this point, it's gonna make a single. It's gonna make 5. Let's see. It's gonna make 5 vertices. And if we select each one, we can drag them out. 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Why the hell are we having only 4? Okay, this is some strange thing. That doesn't matter, but we have, instead of 5 we have 4, which is pure maths. But we've broken those ones into the vertices. We've broken the single vertex into many, so we've made 4 out of 1. And now if we position it properly, I can show you 2 more options that you can use within the editable poly, which is bridge and weld and collapse, actually 3 of them. Okay, so now we have this strange looking hole in our bed, and you see this grid below my house. It distracts me really much, so we can remove it by pressing G on your keyboard. G for removing the grid. Okay, center back on our working object, so right now it's our bed, so press Z to center, and go into the edge mode, select 2 opposing edges, and then go to the edit edges panel and bridge. Now we've connected those 2 edges, and we are on our way of enclosing this object, because in perfection you would want to have your object without any holes, because all the objects inside 3ds Max and any other 3D modeling program, they are empty inside. You wouldn't want to see any holes at the final product. So you're closing those 2 edges, you are connecting them with a bridge, which creates another polygon here. And thing that you can have problem with when trying to connect those edges is that if I trying to connect those 2 edges with a bridge, this is what's gonna happen. You're gonna have a twisted polygon. This is the first sign that your polygons are looking in the different directions from each other. So for instance, what I mean is that if you have 2 planes like this and this, imagine that this plane is that polygon and this plane is this polygon, and we're trying to connect them with the bridge. So let's imagine for now that this is a one object. If we're trying to connect this edge to this edge through the bridge, we're going to be able to do this, but because all of the edges are, all of the polygons are one-sided, if you turn this one 90 degrees, 180, if you're trying to connect this edge to that one, the computer is going to say, okay, he wants to connect them, but obviously the normal, and if you've been taking some kind of mathematical courses, or at least remember something from your boring teacher, you can see that the normal of this plane, basically the direction, its face, it's totally different from this one, because this one is looking up, and you should keep in mind that all the planes and all the edge in all the polygons have one side. This one is looking up, this one, because we turn it, is looking down, and whatever we're trying to connect it with is gonna be twisted. So if you see that problem there, that means only one thing, that you have your polygons facing in different directions. So find out which one is facing different direction, select it, go on into the edit polygons and flip it. This will bring its outside part, its outside face, to the outer world. It's gonna flip it so that it doesn't look inside the object but outside, and now you're gonna be able to connect it perfectly with a bridge, just like that. And if you want to remove this horrible hole, one thing you could do is weld the edges, and another one is to build a structure and then cap everything through the border. And look what happens if you select the border and try to cap it. You're gonna have something that reminds you of a polygon, but it's gonna be very wrong, because this is not how you do it. And it's effectively, what you've done right now is you've placed one polygon between all of those guys, totally wrong, on your geometry. So you wouldn't want to do that. Only cap something that's not bent and that has a basic geometry, like a square, or maybe a rhombus or a pentagon, or whatever, whichever is not bent. Because obviously if you try to cap this instance here, it's gonna make this bent polygon set through to pass down and deform it in an ugly way. So you can only cap something that looks like that, or something circular, I guess, if you'd have something like that. You can cap a hole like this still, and it would be fine, but you shouldn't be doing this on that big hole there. You shouldn't cap it there. So let's try to bring it back to its initial position, how it was until we deform it. Go into the vertices mode and then select target weld, and you can click on each vertex individually and click on the one that you want to weld it to. So you can do it that way, and then click on this one, click on this one, and click this one on to that one. Okay, now you've almost finished your thing. One thing is that your bed is kind of deformed and doesn't look very nice, so take your vertex and bring it back to its normal position by your own hands, fine, like this. Alright, another way we could do it is select those four, go into option called collapse. Yep, there, collapse. This means that they are collapsed and welded together, so really quick and really efficient. And select the top ones as well, and go and collapse again. Want to cooperate together there, and collapse those ones as well. There, perfect. no, just move this one here. There. Okay. Another thing is, if you want to rotate an object to a precise number of angles, you would be using it in the smooth way, like I do right now. So you can see right there and also here that I'm changing it by a precise amount. So you can either tweak it here, tweak it by the round axis, or you could enter a specific value, for instance -39. Bang. There. Also, you could freely rotate it, of course, in any direction you want, but I wouldn't advise you to do that. And if you want to rotate it very strictly, you'll be pressing A and just do it by 5 degrees. So rather than trying to rotate your object for 90 degrees and struggling to find the proper 90.00 thing, you just press A, do it by 5 degrees. So really quickly and snappy. So all of that is just shortcuts. What else I have here? Okay, next object, a cupboard. What I intend to do is, if you played Amnesia, how we call it in Russian, you know that in this game you could hide from monsters and hide from ghosts inside a cupboard. So it would be really, was really nice to hide and then feel like you're inside the game. To increase our field of view, so we can look around more freely. We could close the doors and feel like we're inside the cupboard, slightly protected and not seen by monsters, which is really nice. We're sitting inside the cupboard, hidden. And now I'll explain to you what pivot point means and how we rotate the object around some specific point, which is gonna come really handy later. We'll have our cupboard consisting of 2 doors and 1 box, which will make it into the object you can hide into later within the game. It's gonna have little legs, and the whole thing is gonna weigh about I'll say 70 polygons in total. So right now it's 2 boxes and 1 thing that reminds you of a room that you can hide into. So to make this first purple part, you're gonna use the same principle as when you made the painting. Да, хрен с ним. So we're gonna have a box, we're gonna insert it and then extrude it. Create box. Let's press A, our snappy turning mode. Make it vertical and scale it horizontally and vertically. Bring it forward. So now we have something that we can work with. And if we convert it to editable poly, go into the polygon mode by pressing 4, go into edit polygons and then inset. Inset it by, in my case, 1.6. Press OK. Extrude it inwards. Like that. Be careful not to go through the back polygon. And press OK. Now we have our main part ready. And make doors, which are really other boxes. So rotate it by 90 degrees. So it's vertical. Position it next to the cupboard. Change the dimension of the doors so that they fit your cupboard. Make it neater and make sure that you can squeeze 2 of the doors next to each other. So shift click, drag to clone it, and if you if the dimensions of this box were right, you've got something that looks like it's built for the size of the cupboard. Okay, 2 doors there. Now notice how I can open this door and this door, but how I change the rotation of this door and how it opens. Really funny. To change that, you'll have to go and change the motion options for this particular door, because you can see that when we are pressing E to rotate it, you can see that the axis appears strictly in the middle. This is your point which you are rotating around. To change it, you'll have to go into not create, not modify, but into hierarchy panel, effect pivot point only, and then either center to object if you lost it somewhere, or just press W and move your pivot somewhere you want it to have. So let's say your pivot is there. Deselect everything. So now everything that's anything you want to do with this object is going to be happening at this place there. So for instance, rotate, it's going to bring this door around like that. Your pivot is there. So center of gravity, I think. And if you want to bring it back, if it's somewhere really far away and you don't know where it is, you can press effect pivot point only and then center to object, and it's there. We want it to be there in our case. It should be somewhere here. Now when we try to rotate the door, it's going to be opening properly, and you can see that when we open it as well, this thing goes inside of our main part. So that's just a problem of positioning our door. So our door is inside the object already. So if we drag it out and then effect the pivot and make sure that it's exactly on the edge of the door. Now when we rotate it, when we rotate the door, it's going to be opening physically correctly. But with this one, the pivot stays unaffected, because although it's a clone of this guy, it has its own position and its own pivot. It's like a different entity. And also, when you clone it, you have an option which I didn't talk about earlier. You can either copy it, so make it a totally different object, but so with its own physics and stuff, having the shape of the previous. The second door, the cloned door, will be affected by the changes we do to the parent object. So if we change, for instance, the edge, we'll see that the reference or instance object is changing accordingly to its parent. And if we clone a reference, this will mean that now that if we change the child object, the parent will be affected by the changes within the child object. Really simple. We would like to reflect this door, because if we clone it, this door opens perfectly fine, but this one won't open in the direction we want. This pivot has to be changed manually, and it's going to be not really neat. So rather of doing that, we want to mirror this door in the y-axis and position it there. And now we have everything mirrored, including the geometry and physics. Physics in this case is just the pivot point. And now the door can open easily and correctly in both directions. And if you see that it's opening way too much and is way too much on the edge, just reposition your doors. Ensure that they are more correctly looking than what they used to be. So in my case, when we open this door, there obviously has to be some kind of, I believe it's called hinge, on the side that's gonna be holding the door. So you got the idea. Now we're gonna draw a cylinder for 2 hinges, and because for the sake of our game efficiency, we understand that this is a very minor detail and nobody's gonna really pay so much attention to look at this hinge. Maybe at one glance per game, or several glances if you have different cupboards around the zone that you're running around. But if you're making a hinge, make sides as less as possible, so even 6, maybe 5. I don't like number of 6, so I'll make it 5. And then make sure that you don't stick out the square part out, but rather make it look as round as possible. So maybe rotate it so that you have as many polygons, as many edges sticking out as possible. So rather than having it like that, maybe it's actually nice, I would do it this way, so that you have 3 polygons sticking out rather than 2. Okay, that's our one hinge. Maybe make it shorter, and then shift click, drag, copy. And one really handy way is, instead of pressing enter or clicking on OK, do it a clever way and press space bar. Okay, if you're a gamer, it's gonna be really handy for you, because you are working on WASD keys, Alt, Control, Shift, and all other combinations to the left side from your keyboard, and spacebar is like your enter. Works on Windows as well. Clone those 2 objects as well. It's fine like that, I guess. But you got the idea. I'm not gonna use this cupboard. I'm gonna use my old one because I was paying more attention to it when I was making it. Okay, but one last thing that we want to do is that we want to add little legs to it. So make box, and now attach the legs to the main part. So click on the main part, go into the attach, and attach all of those 4 legs. But don't attach the doors. Maybe attach the hinges, but don't attach the doors, because the doors is what's going to be animated later. And you can, of course, you can animate elements within the object, but that's going to be not really handy. So keep those doors separate from the cupboard for now. Just know that they are there, that you can open the door and have it there. Don't attach it to the main object. Maybe link it to the cupboard, because when you move the cupboard, for instance, you will see that it moves, and whatever is attached to it moves as well with it. So hinges and its legs. If we deselect this element, but the doors stay at the place. So click on the doors, select the select and link option, and link the doors to its cupboard parent. Now that when the parent is moved, even though the doors are not attached to the cupboard, they will move relatively to our main parent object. So that's our cupboard ready. What we've covered is, we've covered the linkage, we've covered the pivot point, and we've revisited the optimization once again. Okay, let's see, the room. The room is just a box. There are different ways of how you can make a room, and also notice how I did the lighting. Right now I have 2 sources of lighting, this one and inside the house as well. It's makes it look a little bit better when you develop in the game, but of course it's totally different from what's rendered. Right now it's almost the same, because I'm not using any kind of shadows or any advanced lighting, and nothing of global illumination no textures, well, some of the textures, but not really developed ones. So, but right now when we work within this environment it looks better. So I use two lightings. To disable them altogether, or rather not to disable them, but to turn them off for the development stage, just press Ctrl L, and that's gonna make you look at everything with default lighting. Press Ctrl L back and you'll have the lighting working. So how I made the room: basically select the box, modify. Now we're working with modifiers, totally different story. Take your box, not editable poly, although you could. Just select your box and go to modifier list, search for the thing called shell. There. If we go to wireframe mode, once again it's F3. So now we can shell our object by inner amount of that much. And now if we go out and right click, convert to editable poly, we want to be able to see what's inside the room. So select this polygon, delete this one, and make sure that the polygons you're working with are flipped inside. If they're not, then you're gonna have troubles with shadowing. And of course by default they are flipped inside because it's a shell modifier. It understands that if you are insetting inwards, you want the polygons to look inside. So we'll have our house like that. Maybe press 2, select those edges and bring it down. Go into the edge mode. You don't have this option sadly here. Go bridge, select those two, bridge, and now instead of clicking on those two and then bridge and then on those two and then bridge again, just press 3 on your keyboard, click once and then right click cap, click here once and right click cap. So we've selected the borders and we've capped them immediately with the polygon, and we can do this because the resulting polygon is not bent and looks okay. Otherwise, if it's bent, you wouldn't be using cap, but you would be doing bridges between your edges to make your geometry more correct. Okay, now we need a window inside of it, and maybe for the ceiling later we'll add wooden beams, but for now let's make a window. So create a box that's gonna have the dimension of your window, position it so that it sticks halfway through the wall. Make sure that from the inside it's not inside of another wall like that, so just inside of one wall halfway, and then click on the main building, go into create geometry, and then rather than working with standard primitives, which gives you an option of selecting box, sphere, our cylinder, whatever, not extended primitives, but select the compound objects, and then it's working just like a modifier, but compound objects has different instructions, and you could use them on the objects to do the tasks really quickly. For instance, you could select this big box and click Boolean, pick operand B. So now you're going to be moving the mesh. So pick operand B and click on the red box. Now we've just used the red box to chop through the object with the Boolean object, and we now modified this green box into a Boolean object. Right now it's a Boolean object, and if we go to modify panel on the very top, you can see that it has a Boolean option tied to it. You can select operands and then click on the box. Box 9 is our big box, and if you click on box 10 you can actually move the whole like this. So pretty cool. So you go out of the Boolean operand, Boolean options, sub options, by clicking on the very top of it, closing it with a little minus there, right clicking on the object, convert to editable poly. Now you're not able to access any of the operands, of course. So we've converted this to editable poly, and we've lost now the ability of changing the operand's position. But now we have the room ready to work with, and notice how we have this segment here and there. This edge serves to the computer as a reference for where those polygons are going to be located at relative to the outer polygon, sorry. So if we remove that, we're going to have trouble with our polygon there. So if we backspace, remove it, if we cannot do that because the computer needs it to calculate the position. So we cannot remove it. And actually, this is a whole polygon which looks like O, and it's not how it should be done. This is another part of optimization thing. But for right now, we're not losing any of the geometry. We're creating ourselves a problem later with the texturing. So later, when we'll be placing pictures on top of our meshes, there shouldn't be any kind of polygons, bent polygons, once again, like those ones. So what we could do right now is connect those vertices and split this whole poor polygon into 4 different entities like this. Now none of them is bent, and the same one for the outer part. Make sure when you select it that you don't accidentally move your vertex, and if you spot something, immediately press Ctrl Z so that you don't ruin the geometry. Ruin, destroyed. It's okay. And although we cannot change the operand's location, we can still select the edges and move them within the polygon, within the mesh, like this. Using those techniques, we can make a really nice looking room. And one more thing that I would like to show you before we end up for today, because it has been a long tutorial and I'm really tired right now, but still it's a pleasure to work with you guys, whoever you are. I really like to teach 3ds Max and other programs. One last thing that I want to show you is that, for instance, when you are working on an object like this one, if you have an edge and you want to move it up, for instance, like that, you're not going to change any position of those 2 edges there because they are vertical from the beginning. However, if your whole object is tweaked like that, when you're trying to move an edge, suddenly you are going to be suddenly you're going to be able to move it up and change the whole geometry like that. Of course, you could go into the edit geometry, just like I showed you when we did our little bench, and select the edge and slide up and down, not to change any position of the vertical edges, but it's going to be kind of difficult for you because everything is going to be trying to go to the side. And what you could do instead is change the your working mode from view, or rather world, it should be set to world. You can change it from there to local, and then you will have your edge presented in a different way. Now your axes are gonna be in a more not in this case, but usually it has a better location of axes. Okay, so if we play with it, yeah, parent works well. So you can see that the axes are immediately positioned properly according to the position of our room. So parent works well. Usually local is okay. Screen is just your position of camera where you're looking at. The y-axis is always going to be up, so if you can find the angle, that's going to be fine. But apart from that I wouldn't really recommend to use it. Okay guys, I'll see you next time, and we'll see what else we can make. Hopefully we'll start to texture some of our objects, and it's gonna be great fun. My name is Igor Aherne, by the way, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.